All right, y'all. Welcome to the Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report, part of the Great Days Outdoors podcast network. I'm your host, Luke Barton, and each week we'll be talking with expert charter guides and subject matter experts about what's happening in our local waters. On this show, we advocate for sustainable fishing practices aimed at keeping this amazing fishery healthy and thriving for generations to come. As the fishing season adjusts to cooler temps, some target species are just heating up. So buckle up for another great episode. Let's jump in and find out what's been biting. Hooked on fishing? Then you're part of the local community that Long Bay Point Bait and Tackle cares about serving and giving back to, providing you with the right selection for each season's target species. They're your one-stop shop to gear up with the best bait, tackle, and insider tips to catch your next trophy fish. You can fuel up right out front on the water and then chat with the crew inside for hot tips on where they're biting. So swing by today. Long Bay Point Bait and Tackle, where your fishing adventures start and finish with your trophy catch on their scales. Listen up. AFTCO has a promotional gift for all Great Days Outdoors Podcast Network listeners. They're now offering a camo sunglasses cleaner cloth with any purchase of AFTCO products. For those cold, wet, or windy days, I especially enjoy my weatherproof fabric barricade jacket, as well as my helm insulated fishing gloves. All you got to do to get your coupon code is text LCBFR to 779-345-2918. You'll get subscribed to our email list, and we'll send you the promo code via email. All right, y'all. Welcome to the Lower Chesapeake Bay Fishing Report, part of the Great Days Outdoors podcast network. I'm your host, Luke Barton, and each week we'll be talking with expert charter guides and subject matter experts about what's happening in our local waters. On this show, we advocate for sustainable fishing practices aimed at keeping this amazing fishery healthy and thriving for generations to come. As the fishing season adjusts to cooler temps, some target species are just heating up. So buckle up for another great episode. Let's jump in and find out what's been biting. All right, guys. Well, welcome to this week's show. It's definitely the hot topic on everybody's mind. These gigantic bluefin tuna that are within reach for the average boat, especially on a calm day. So we're going to jump in and talk with a friend of the show, Captain Jay Brooks, aboard Smoke Show Sport Fishing. Welcome back, Jay. How you been?
Oh, I'm doing well, man. We been getting out a couple of times, and we're happy that they're finally starting to show up.
I know it's so exciting, man. I mean, I feel like what is Christmas? Who cares about Christmas? It's like, when are the bluefin going to start running? We start to hear those reports from up north, and we just get giddy. So, I mean, what have you guys been doing? What have you been seeing? Have you come tight on one? Like, tell me all the things.
So it started off real slow for us. Realistically, we started fishing real early. We made the decision because the monetary investment right off the bat isn't a lot. So because you're not running 60 to 90 miles offshore
Right.
to look for fish, and so if the weather was nice, we were going essentially at least one day a weekend. And so initially, we're kind of trying to push further north, running 20, 30 miles to the north, because that's where, the bite's been really off Ocean City.
Mm.
We were looking at humps that were a little bit closer to home.
Hmm.
And then there just wasn't a bunch of bait on it like they were seeing in Ocean City. So, we were using our network, talking to as many people as we can. And they were just seeing a ton of bait up there, and they're on the humps. And so we get to our humps, and there just wasn't a lot to mark there, unfortunately.
Mm.
So the next time we fished a little bit shallower, last year the bite really was off the eastern shore.
Hmm. Like Smith Island area.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, and again, you can look at Omega, right? So watch where Omega is, because that's where you're going to find your bait. You're going to find your birds, and birds are obviously a huge indicator if there's fish around.
Right.
So we fished there in the bait, for a day, and we caught more birds than we did fish. And again, never marked them.
Yeah.
It's just odd because we're just really expecting them to show up like they did last year. And kind of like the way they showed up off Ocean City, we figured they'd slowly migrate down this way. But it just wasn't to be. And then so finally last weekend we went back out, and they were busting. And so that was nice. Very frustrating because you see them all around you.
Oh,
You
yeah.
drive right over the top of them. We literally had them busting right behind the boat, and drive your baits right over the top of them, and just nothing. And then you just couldn't believe it. We got it on video, where they just busted off the left and right corner of the boat, and we had a photographer with us, and he couldn't believe it. And so he actually came
That's
up here from Moorhead, where they're catching them, to try to get photos of these fish busting, because they're not really busting there the way that they are here. And so
right.
and he's trying to get some photos for Marlin Magazine, things of that nature. But and so and it was just very slow. I think there was two boats that caught or hooked up first thing in the morning, and then it was dead. the mid-afternoon all the way up until mid-morning to mid-afternoon, it was dead. And then mid-afternoon turned back on, and it seemed like, all the boats that were fishing, started to see fish and then hook up. So that's when we hooked ours. We actually had a Avit 130, one of my buddies. So 44 pounds of drag. Still took us 2 hours. Get
Wow.
it, yeah. And it's not that we don't know what we're doing. It's just it was a very big fish, and so the photographer, he's been with us blue marlin fishing. He's been with us when we caught blue marlin. He's been on other boats, and he just could not believe the amount of drag this fish was taking. I mean, just as he wanted to, he was taking the drag, and so and
That's
we
crazy.
we scale tested the drag before we left the dock that morning, so we know it was exactly 44 pounds. And so we finally got to the back of the boat, came undone before we could get any good photos of it, unfortunately. But
Mm,
we had a 15-foot leader. We were already on leader. I mean, it was right behind the boat.
yeah.
Just so I felt bad for the camera guy, for our photographer, because we were trying to get some good photos for him, and then with the water being so green, you could see him down there, but it was just,
Kind of
not
murky.
anything ideal for me, right? Yeah, the
Yeah.
turbidity was really bad, and so, but yeah, I mean, that's it. I mean, it's not. Some guys have done much better than we have. A lot of these guys, especially on the smaller boats, are commercial fishing now.
Hmm.
Because the barrier of entry on anything below 36 feet is significantly lower than a barrier of entry to something
Ah,
like 36 feet and above. So as far as like the permitting remains the same, but the safety gear that you have to have to be official is significantly less. And so we opted not to commercial fish this year because we didn't want to buy the $5,000 life raft. We've done that in the past, and it didn't make any sense for us to have such a short commercial season
mhm.
and invest that much money to turn around and say, okay, well, now we got to keep catch so many fish before we even break even. Just so we're just fun fishing right now.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. And just for those listening to further educate us on that. So if I heard you correctly, there's a delineation between if your boat is 36 feet or larger, you have a whole
Mm-hmm.
different set of rules and
Yep.
compliance that you have to be in, which is basically investing in, you said life raft. Are there any other key things that you've got to have on board in order to qualify to be commercial fishing on a boat over 36 feet?
I'm gonna go off the top of my head again. It's been a couple of years since we did it. The life raft is what stood out to me because that was the biggest cost.
Right.
Also, you're going to have survival suits. I believe you still have to have survival suits on the smaller vessels.
Hmm.
Again, I could be off. I'm just going off memory off, several years ago, the year that we did commercial fishing. Same thing with, you should have EPIRB, all that good stuff, along with all your proper permits, and then be able to actually take care of the fish once you get to the boat. That's another thing that I think we will see is as the season goes on that a lot of these individuals that they haven't commercial fished aren't going to know how to properly care for their fish.
Mm.
So you should really at that point bleed them out, cool them off, get them in the boat, essentially gut them, cut the gill plate off, make sure you start icing them down immediately, and ensuring that your catch is in good quality. Otherwise, you're gonna have a no sell.
Right. Because it's all burnt up.
Yeah, then you essentially killed a fish for no reason. You gave it away, and no one can do anything with it, unfortunately. So that's a lose-lose situation. So it's much better for the newcomers to really ask the questions and learn how to properly care for their fish.
Yeah. It's almost like a sort of I say unregulated, meaning like there's these things that you have to go get, and since these bluefin are within, a couple, 10 to 12 mile range, these
Hmm.
under 36-foot boats are able to go after them commercially with a much less cost-wise barrier to entry, but
Hmm.
perhaps haven't really received that appropriate like mentorship from somebody that, has done it to be able to go out there and do it properly. A couple questions I've got, I've always seen, you mentioned the gill plate being cut off and then they pack it with ice. I always see these like this like green cellophane looking paper laid over the fish. What is that?
The rice, so that's rice paper.
Rice
So
paper.
yep, so they put the rice paper on there so that way they always know what side has been is top side. So that way, no matter where it is in its journey, that's always going to be the top side of the fish, because theoretically, the fish on the bottom of the fish, it's not quite as high quality because it has the pressure. You have several hundred pounds
Ah,
resting on that side, so you don't want to end up, turning it over and then bruising it, and et cetera. So they always put the rice paper on the side, and that'll be the top of the fish until it gets sold and cut up.
That's so it makes perfect sense, but I never would have like if you would have said, who wants to be a millionaire or why do they put the rice paper on this side? I would have never guessed that, but that makes perfect sense. And then
Yeah.
what are some of the other things that we've got to do? So cutting the gill plate out, I mean, don't you almost have to have like a sawzall to be able to do that?
Yep. And so, and that's really the best way to do it is, you'll see, a lot of the boats, they'll pull out their sawzall, but, just be, Makita or, Milwaukee, whatever brand you so
Yeah.
shoot. So they'll do that. And again, that's just getting that core temperature down. Because after that fight, that fish is worked up so much heat that you don't want it to start cooking from the inside. So you're
Uh,
really trying to remove as much of that heat as quickly as possible. Because again, that's going to improve the quality of the fish and improve, the sale of your fish or the chances of the sale of your fish.
right.
But and again, like I don't want anyone to think that either that I'm a mentor or I have the ability because we have some great guys in the local area that know what they're doing. Like my first year, I worked with Robert Smith. So Robert, he knows what he's doing as far as preparing the fish.
Hmm.
Actually, this last week we fished with Brian Olslick.
Hmm.
And so, Brian obviously was on Wicked Tuna. He's
Yep.
been our friend since before Wicked Tuna. And so, he went with us this last weekend. That was actually his 130 that we caught that fish on.
Oh, cool.
And so, yeah, I mean, and he still ate up with it, whether he's on the show or not. So he loves it. But, those would be guys that, you'd want to seek out and you want to talk about, hey, like, what's the proper method, things, just to make sure that you're doing it right. Because, it's such a shame to see, some fish brought to market that's in such poor quality that they're not going to be able to do anything with it. And again,
Right.
I'm not saying that just because, someone has a bigger boat that they automatically know how to treat a fish or how to catch fish or anything like that, because there's some exceptional anglers in the local area that have boats that are smaller than 36 feet. And,
Hmm.
quite did it last year. So I was actually carrying our new boat, new to us then boat. So we didn't do it at all last year. So, anyone that's listening, I don't want them to think that, I'm saying that, just because you're in a smaller boat, but the barrier of entry makes it so that way, if you really want to make money, it makes more sense to be, have lower overhead and have a vessel that you don't have to buy, as extensive safety gear, or, you can burn less fuel, especially with your runs being shorter and you're not really, no one's staying out overnight.
Hmm.
Because you can just come home and sleep in your own bed. So
Right.
versus the Outer Banks where they're essentially going to go out until they get your fish. So you want an area that you can get out of the weather. You want an area that you can take a nap in. Here, you can just go in. So
Right. Right.
again, so I don't want it to ever come across that I'm saying that, oh well, you have to have a big boat, because it's not. In my opinion, it's not a big boat fishery. It really doesn't make the same sense unless you
Hmm.
already have the gear. If you already have the gear, then absolutely go do it. Knock
Yeah.
yourself out.
Yeah.
Catch your fish and treat them right.
Yeah, and you mentioned the 130, which is basically like a winch, on a rod and reel, so to speak. And that kind of draws a line in my head to like making sure that you're properly equipped. Like, yes, it's very exciting to go out and target these things. And I learned this lesson last year because we went out on a smaller boat and all we had was 50 wides and only 180. And we got hit on a 50 wide with a fish that was well over 100 inches. And we saw it across the back of a 8 foot 6 inch beam, and the fish was longer than the back of the boat. And I mean, I just remember being at that fish's mercy, just feeling it swim, and there was nothing we could do. And so it was almost, in hindsight, I realized like it was kind of foolish to even be hooked to that fish in the first place with inappropriately sized gear. And even if it would have been an under 73, the amount of time it would have taken to fight that fish and get it in, if we didn't have the stuff to properly care for it and ice it down, like you said, we've kind of effectively like harvested a fish inappropriately and almost wasted it, so to speak. So I'm curious, like backing up a little bit to those fish were up near Ocean City. They're starting to migrate down. In your years of fishing for these bluefin tuna, what would you say are some of the environmental factors that contribute to them making that migration? Is it certain temps, certain salinity, certain chlorophyll? Because I want to start understanding that so I can use like, Hilton's real-time navigator, for example, to look at some of these things and try to put the pieces together as to kind of the why for their migration.
So I would say for the inshore species, I think they're just following the bait, honestly.
Okay.
Because I've looked at, hey, the water temperature, and for a while people were like, hey, it needs to be 50, 8 degrees. But I know, last year they're catching them in significantly lower water temperature. Again, I was talking about the fish that we had on Saturday. The water was extremely turbid. I mean, if the fish was 4 or 5 feet underneath the water, and you couldn't really get great photos or magazine quality photos of it because, which you should have, but the water was so green that you couldn't see. So realistically, I think the fish are following the bait, and as long as the bait's around, they're going to try to stick to it. They are moving south, but so that's why our hopes are that this is the beginning of it for us.
Hmm.
Ocean City, they've been crushing them since before Thanksgiving,
Okay.
and so
Wow.
yeah, they've had a long time there, and so they've been really last weekend they had a great weekend, and so we're just hoping that fishery kind of starts to move south for us. I wish I had a better answer than that. That
No,
hey, they're
that
following the bait, figure it out. But so like, but for what we were seeing is, I briefly touched on it earlier. When you're seeing the birds, and there's difference between birds, and there's difference between birds working. And so once you see a group of birds working, even if it's only four or five, they're looking at something that they like. And
mhm,
so that's what I'm looking for as far as captain goes. And so,
got it.
there's some guys that have bird radar that can turn that on. Some guys have just excellent sight and they can, see the birds working from miles away. And so that's really what I'm doing is I'm up there looking for birds. I'm looking for signs, more than anything. If
Yeah.
I don't see signs, I just, I keep it moving into a different area where I find signs. And that's what we found this last weekend was we find the birds first and start steering towards the birds. And then you'd see the tuna underneath them once you started to get closer to it because it was fairly choppy. So you couldn't see the tuna rolling underneath the birds as you
Ah,
get getting closer.
yeah.
So I would say that's the biggest thing is look for the bait. We weren't marking like pods of bait like we have in the past. Realistically, it was, bait here and there, but it was the birds that was able to identify the bait and then identify, where tuna were feeding. So
Hmm.
then they could come down and pick up the scraps from the tuna.
Got it. That makes sense.
So, look for the bait, look for the birds, and then hopefully your tuna is going to be underneath it.
So kind of splitting your attention between, visual fishing and your
Mm-hmm.
your bottom machine,
Mm-hmm.
which I heard you mentioned earlier. You guys got your bite when you didn't even see any marks on the screen.
Yeah, but so actually, I had just gone downstairs with my buddy Lee. I was like, all right, and then he was like, hey, they're busting right up here. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. We just seen them busting all day, and
Yeah.
he drove over to the right school, right? And so essentially, again, very little bait on the screen. We were never marking the actual tuna. We were at 70 feet of water, and we saw the birds, and then that led us to the tuna, and he was like, hey, like cool. And so we were just doing circles, roughly in the same area all day.
Mm.
But yeah, I mean, it's just go out there and put your time in, and that's what we've been trying to do. And again,
Yeah.
there's been some guys that that are able to go nearly every day that have gotten really really good as far as catching them. And so,
Hmm.
but to go back to what you're saying as far as like having the proper gear, I used to have a 30-foot center console, and we've caught bluefin from that one. And what we did the same thing for sword fishing is you put a swivel rod holder up front. So then you don't have to have that 44 pounds of drag that we had because I have a big boat. And so it's hard to, you're moving the fish to the boat versus a center console with a swivel rod holder up front. You can literally, with 20 pounds of drag,
Just follow.
take yourself straight to the fish. Yeah. And then just wait until you have a good dart shot. And so that's what we used to do. And it was literally, just keeping the fish in front of you. I mean, the motor's always behind you, so you're relatively safe. If he, does a big circle, you're good.
Hmm.
And really just you're taking yourself to the fish because you got to think about how much 20 pounds, can you move your boat, with 20 pounds of pressure on a dock line? Absolutely you can. And so
Hmm.
you think about that and you're just getting yourself closer and closer to the fish. And so
Yeah.
that's really the ideal way to do it. And that's the way we used to do it. And it worked really well for us. Even when, 30-foot boat is pretty heavy, we are still able to do that. And so that worked really, really well. And I think some of the guys are starting to do that here. And that's just, just make sure that your rod holders are reinforced. You see a lot
Yeah.
of times just rod holders that get ripped out, or you'll see
Yeah.
a gunnel that, starts to flex a lot. And so just be mindful of that. I would definitely make sure that you had, something underneath that rod holder. But I would get, a swivel rod holder. I'd put it up front and make sure and actually look at it when you're placing the rod holder up front to make sure that you can still reel. A lot of times
Hmm.
they'll put it, oh, I want it on this side of the boat for whatever reason, and they realize that they're trying to reel,
Against.
yeah, essentially like this. And
Yeah.
well, okay, but now if I have it like this, so this is how I had it all the way to the right on my contender. I had it on the right hand side because I knew I could sit on my, on my leg, stand
Hmm.
with my left leg, and then reel. It would just be, as if I was standing right behind the rod. And so
Yeah.
that's how we do it there.
And that's also, I
Um,
imagine, a little bit easier for the guy behind the wheel because then they're able to, you can see your angler, you can see the line, and you can continue
mhm.
to operate the boat, accordingly versus trying to look over your shoulder and back down a center console, which is very dangerous,
Yeah.
especially in any sort of seas. So those are all incredible tips. The swivel rod holder makes so much sense to me because last year, like I said, we were in a smaller boat, 24 foot, got hooked up to a giant on a 50 wide, and it was like playing that game of, okay, we're backing down just a little bit. Oh, fish turn directions. Now we're trying to lift it out of the rod holder, completely
Hmm.
change it around, and quarter towards the fish at a 45-degree angle off the front. I mean, it was a nightmare. Had we had a swivel rod holder, it would have been a total game changer.
And you can get a drop-in swivel rod holder or swivel also. So, let's say you already have that set up, that's fine. Then just drop a drop in, and then you'll be good to go. So just be mindful that then you have less of your actual rod butt in the rod holder. So
Yeah.
make sure it's tied off
Okay.
well.
Yeah. And going back to some of our, previous episodes we've talked, you've shared a lot about like preparation and the importance of a high quality, capable mate that's making sure that all the checklists are there.
Mhm.
What I'm really hearing, especially for these bluefin tuna, is that there's a pretty big list of appropriate gear that you need to have to be able to do it safely, effectively, and sustainably to make sure that the fish are properly cared for. So, if folks are wanting to learn more about this, book a trip aboard Smoke Show, get a little bit more education, what's the best way for them to reach out to you and get connected to get booked on Smoke Show?
Yeah, so we're going to open up booking next week as long as fishing stays well or stays good.
Hmm.
So they can either give us a call directly on our line, but realistically, if they go to the website, www.smokeshowsportfishing.com, that's the easiest way. There or Instagram, if they want to message us on Instagram, same thing, Smoke Show Sport Fishing on Instagram. They can go there, they can message us. Usually they'll get me directly. If they go to the website, they'll get my wife more times than not. And
Okay.
so, and so she has most of the answers. And so if she doesn't, then she'll just essentially refer them to me, and then I'll give them a call. But yeah, that's it. We're gonna try to go this weekend. And again, I just want to make sure that fishing is good enough to take people
Right.
before we actually make the leap, saying, okay, fine, we're going to take a charter, because I never want to take someone and then take their money, because charters are expensive enough as it is, and then have fishing just be adequate. Now,
Yeah.
whether they bite or not, the fish has a say in that. But I want to make
Right.
sure that fishing is good enough where realistically we feel that we have a very good shot at picking up one of the fish.
Yeah. I mean, it's just like I just went on a hunting trip and it's like you do a big investment to get there and get in the location, but at the end of the day, like the guide, nobody can control if a buck's going to walk out. Nobody can control if a tuna is going to bite a hook. So at the end of the day, I think from what I'm learning, the appropriate expectation
Mhm.
for anybody booking a trip is like you're getting an opportunity with an experienced captain on a very comfortable boat to be in the right area to even have that opportunity. And that's where the value is. And then the icing on the cake is if one of them actually, decides to bite and get hooked up. So it's to me, it's like a paramount fishing experience that's worth the investment just to get out there and have the opportunity. But obviously, there's no guarantees. And for those that are listening that haven't, explored a smoke show before, tell us just a little bit about the boat, because I mean, it's a gorgeous boat, very comfortable ride.
Yeah. It's funny you say that, because some of the folks that were with us, like Brian Olslick, he was saying how he was listening to the radio. You could hear the radio downstairs, and just everyone was talking about how nasty it was and how snotty it was and how they were cold. And he was like, I didn't feel any of that. And so, again, we're lucky enough to have a 54-foot custom. She has a brand new engine, so she's quiet. You're not going to smell, the diesel,
Mm-hmm.
smoke, anything like that. That's what it gets a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
But so we have a full head, a full salon, heat, AC, you name it, you need to lay down. We've got a bed, we've got a whole bedroom for you. Most people stay on the backside. We listen to music, have a good time. Happy boat catches fish, and so
Yeah.
that's the big thing that we provide, is a happy boat.
Well,
But yeah, I think she happens to be pretty comfortable as well for us. So again, that makes it nice where we don't have to pick and choose our days quite as much, versus if
right.
we're on a smaller vessel, especially this time of year, comfort really does, you
Oh
know,
yeah.
how long are you going to stay? How hard are you going to fish if you're not comfortable and you're upset and you're kind of, in the Marines, we call it, you go internal, and you start thinking about, yourself and your own comfort versus, are the lines right? Am I looking for fish? Am I doing the right things to put us in a position to succeed? And
Mm-hmm.
so that's one of the things that we're very, very fortunate about with our boat, is that she does that. She makes us comfortable and she puts us in a position to succeed.
Yeah, I can speak from firsthand experience having done this last year on a couple of center consoles with no curtains on some of these
Oh,
30-degree days. You get to like noon, 1 o'clock, and you're like, I don't really care about fishing anymore. I just want to go defrost. You're just so
yeah.
frozen to the core. So the thought of being on a 54-foot, custom sport fish with a heated salon, I mean, that experience alone, like being with your buddies and like for lack of better terms, the lap of luxury on the water while also having the chance to get hooked up on a bluefin tuna. I mean, that's worth its weight in gold right there. So, folks that are listening, definitely go check out Smoke Show Sport Fishing to get booked and have a chance at one of these monsters. Captain Jay, thank you so much for being on the show and sharing some of your experience and knowledge about this fishery so that we can be better equipped to approach this and do it the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Well, folks, that's going to wrap up a really cool conversation learning more about bluefin tuna fishing here off the coast of Virginia Beach. Let's stick around for a quick word from our sponsors that make this great content free for you each week, and we'll be back with you real soon. Hilton's Offshore Charts. The days of heading out and blindly looking for good fishing areas are pretty much over. Don't waste time and money on fuel searching for fish. You need the most recent, highest resolution images to not only know where to go, but where not to go. The knowledge provided by today's technology is critical when planning an offshore fishing trip. So make the choice that professional captains all over the East Coast make and choose Hilton's Real-Time Navigator. The easy-to-use interface and excellent customer service will have you on the fish every time you go. Check them out at hiltonsoffshore.com. That's hiltonsoffshore.com. All right, guys. Well, welcome to this week's show. We're going to take a dive, pun intended, into a topic that is unique, both because we have a very unique fishery going on right now with the bluefin tuna that have moved in, just off the coast, and the idea of spearfishing for them. So I'd like to welcome back to the show Captain Michael Hosang with Fishing for Mortgages. How you doing, man?
Hello, hello. How's it going?
It's going good, man. It's been a while since we've talked. It's typically a summertime, dream for you with the spearfishing around here. But I know, like we talked about on your episode before, you've spearfished all over the world in all different types of waters. And you reached out to me this week and you're like, hey, let's talk about the idea of spearfishing for bluefin tuna. And it raises a really interesting topic. So, like, before we dive into it, though, for our listeners that are getting to hear your voice for the first time, tell us a little bit about fishing for mortgages. What does that mean? Who are you? What do you do? And what's your kind of passion of choice for when it comes to fishing?
All right. So obviously passion of choice is spearfishing, but I do like hook and line fishing as well. I'm always out there in the bay with the rest of us on the tower, running the bridge, running the eastern shore, running the ocean front, looking for ray mats, trying to find the big boy cobias and stuff like
Yep.
that. Primarily cobia fishing in the summertime is what I go for. But spearfishing, we look for any species that are available in the bay. But as far as what I do mortgages for a living, residential, investment, primary, secondary, vacation homes, and pretty much all up and down the East Coast, from Florida all the way up to Pennsylvania. I think is about as far as we get. Maybe one more state past Pennsylvania, but I gotta check that. But basically up and down the East Coast.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, yeah, big passion for mortgages. Been doing it for 20 some years now.
Yep, I remember the story when we got on the episode for the first time. Guys, go back and listen to that episode with Mike from very early on. You get to hear that story of how he got into the mortgage business, which obviously coincides greatly with his passion for fishing and having that flexibility to get out there and chase when you get a chance to chase. And so I'm curious, I think in every sport, whether it's shooting or hunting, fishing, there's like levels, like there's like the novice level, then there's the intermediary level, then there's the advanced, and then there's like expert, right? And so,
Yeah.
fishing like, rod and reel, and then you go up to like the expert levels and like in terms of like complexity, physical capability, equipment, and then like margin for error and risk, I'd put, spearfishing for huge game fish like way up in that expert category. Because it's not like you can just jump in the water and do it unless you're like pretty much in marathon condition shape and have all the right gear to do it safely. And then again, the buddy in the boat, etc. So why this conversation? What's got your goat when it comes to the thought of, spearfishing a bluefin tuna?
Because they're massive on this side of the U.S. I've shot them on the West Coast, out of San Diego and out of L.A. You go out to the different islands, Catalina, and out past Catalina, kind of in between Catalina and like Santa Barbara, that huge waterway. They
Yeah.
get runs of big giant schools of bluefin tunas, but they're anywhere between the butter balls, like you kind of see in the picture behind my noggin. That's a butter ball. That one was maybe 60 to 80 pounds roughly. We don't have a scale out there, and we'll stay out
Yeah.
there for a couple of days. But then I've shot 100 to 120 pounders out there, and then my buddy Garrett, which I'll send you a couple of pictures of, shot a 200 pounder out there.
Hmm.
And 200 pounders are about the biggest of the bigger categories. There have been some bigger ones in the 250, 300 pound shop, but those are a little bit more rare out there.
Yeah.
But on this side, I mean, you've seen them. They're 3, 4, 5, 600 pounds on a regular basis.
Yeah, they get really, really big. And obviously, it's almost like with cobia, where the regulations are set obviously for good reason with sustainability in mind. But the challenge there being like if you look at a cobia, for example, our regulations have been, minimum size 40 inches and only one over 50 inches. And so, in the rod and reel situation, you always get the opportunity to net that fish, get it in the boat and measure it. How do you, again, back to this kind of expert level, because you can't make a mistake there shooting an undersized fish, or in the case of a bluefin tuna, potentially an oversized fish, you know, how much experience, how much time does it take to get to a place where you can comfortably make those shots knowing that you're staying within regulations? I mean, that's got to be a little bit tricky, right?
Yeah, it's very tricky. And really, since you're on the two limit and you got the slot fish, you really hope that your first fish, and I'll start with, we always hold out. I'll definitely swim past fish. You'll get new guys that I'm sure have shot undersized cobia, the 4 o'clock 40, if you will.
Hmm.
But my guys, my crew, we've been doing it a long time. Personally, I've never shot an underfish. In fact, the smallest one I think I've ever shot was 42 inches.
Okay.
But I'll swim past cobia all day long, and I know how to hunt them. I know how to find them in the water. In fact, I know on the last episode with Austin during cobia season, he gave me a shout out saying that he was having a bad day
Yeah.
and called me up, and he was like, "Are they here?" And I told him, I was like, get your knocker rigs out, because every single dive, and I gave him, where I was,
Hmm.
literally every single dive. As soon as I got to the bottom into the rocks at about 45, 50 feet, I was getting bum rushed by 20, 30, 40, 50 cobias.
Mm.
And it was every single set, every single dive without fail. So my buddy and I were just looking, and he shoots them on a pole spear. So I kind of waited that out, looked around. I know I saw one probably around 45, 46 inches. It ended up being 48 inches. And we found a set that was a class of upper 50s, and he hadn't shot a monster yet on a pole spear. So I came out of the water. I was like, yo, I just did a big dive, and there's some giants down on this set. So I sent them back down on that set, and he came up on a pole spear with a 58 inch.
That's a monster. That
Yeah,
is a monster.
yeah, and he actually stoned that one.
So how do we subscribe to this service where we find out where the fish are on days when it sucks?
You got my phone number. That's the only way.
I'm kidding, but I was just thinking, I was like, they've got, the evolution of all of the bottom machines, and then live scope, and now there's mic scope, which is just,
That's right.
eyes under the water are better than anything else you could imagine. But, back to these bluefin tuna. So, obviously it's not legal to shoot these guys on the East Coast Atlantic waters with a spear gun. Any idea the reasoning why? And the reason I ask that, again, we always promote sustainability. So I'm a firm believer in whatever the regulations are that are out there are put there with intent and purpose to protect the species so that they can, continue to thrive. But in your opinion, what's the reason against spearfishing on the Atlantic coast?
The only thing I can think of, well, I from what I understand, it wasn't something that was brought up initially when gear and or type of fishing for bluefin tuna was set up and the voting was put in place and all that jazz. Spearfishing just wasn't a subject matter, so it ended up being on the cannot do category versus the allowance. And also, when that was going on, spearfishing really wasn't as prominent of a thing. It was, it's a niche sport still, but it was extremely, minute as far as, especially on the East Coast, Florida, people have been spearfishing for eons and eons, but up here, it's really only started to take off in probably the last 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
Which is great. It's another different type of fishery, but and back to sustainability, I don't think really it has a whole lot to do with sustainability because spearfishing a 400, 500, 600 pound bluefin would be significantly more difficult than rod and reel.
Right. You're in like a real minority category of like folks that would actually go out there and do it. So does kind of raise the question, like and I remember this from like the VMRC committee meeting, like they kind of score things in terms of like their perceived impact, like days on the calendar year in early June are scored as like higher impact because there's going to be more folks not in school, kids not in school. There's good weather. There's a push. Fish are hungry, eating, etc. Talking about cobia. But when you think about a bluefin tuna, like what's the perceived impact or maybe reasoning that would prevent them from legalizing spearfishing in your opinion?
I think there's a phobia really about spearfishing because if you think about it, Goliath grouper got protected because the scuba divers were absolutely crushing the Goliath groupers to the point of practical extinction. And so they put a moratorium on them. And now, it's the reverse where the Goliath grouper are pretty much taking over every single reef, in the southern states. You can't dive anywhere without seeing giant Goliath groupers in the 300 to 500, 600 pound class. And you shoot a fish, they're coming to take it. You catch a fish, they're coming to eat it. It's just crazy. But I think a lot of that happens because of, when you're scuba diving, you can stay down for a lot longer. You've got plenty of time to, aim up. You got a, big stringer of fish you can put on your belt, or you can float them up like they do with the floats and stuff like that. So I'd be specifically trying to get free dive spearfishing for these tuna legalized. It'd be a big, long battle, I feel like, because you're fighting a machine,
right?
But I don't think we'd be in the way by any stretch. And as far as the regulations, we could definitely set up super tight regulations. Only allow it during the jumbo time period.
Right.
Because
so that there's no concern.
About size.
Yeah. Because there is a slot right now. It's what 27 to 47 inches is if you get two only. It's almost like cobia. So you could have two fish as long as only one of the two was over 47 but under 73.
Right.
And then if you're gonna keep, sorry, let me back up. Let's say this a different way. They have to be under 73 inches, and then if you get two, only one of the two can be between 47 and 73, and then that under that you keep has to be between 27 and 47, which is really, really tight to figure that out. I don't know that anyone's going to find an under 47-inch bluefin tuna right now based on what I'm hearing.
Not on this side of the water. You can find them all day over on the West Coast, but over here, the smallest one I saw even jumping out of the water last year, because I haven't been out this year, was probably 100 inches.
Yeah.
And I mean, there were fewer small ones caught last year than there were big ones. So there were a lot of reviving going on.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Probably 20 minutes to get ours back.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like the way, so I think it's fair to say that the sort of general assessment of bluefin tuna on the East Coast is that they are considered a sort of like endangered, critically endangered species, and that's why there's all these tight regulations around them because they're such a sought after fish or whatnot. And if you go to the interwebs and you look it up, it's kind of indicating that they're viewing spearfishing as a sort of unsustainable method. Which, again, to your point, it's like you're fighting against the machine. It's hard to picture that being an issue for two reasons. One, it's only available here typically during the cold winter months. So I don't imagine there's going to be a whole lot of free divers out there anyways.
Correct.
And then two, I'm just having a hard time picturing like if it was legalized and only available in January during that very short jumbo season,
how many are we?
Yeah,
how many we're going to get?
Right. How many are we going to get? My hat's off to anyone that's able to actually like get in the water and effectively, shoot one of these things. But to your point, it's like for someone like yourself who's a true like sportsman, that it's like, okay, what's the next big achievement to go after. Like this would be that sort of creme de la creme thing to like check off your bucket list that like, hey, I was able to go out, target one of these jumbo bluefin tunas, with my spear gun and do it. Which again, from an ethics perspective, like I'm picturing all these like shows I've seen where these guys go out with those, harpooning boats, and it's like it's hard to reconcile how a spear fisherman free diving in the water is somehow less sustainable or less ethical than a boat with a platform where a guy, is throwing the harpoon in there.
Exactly. Exactly right. And to be honest with you, even, like the harpoon guys, they've got spotter planes,
Hmm.
and so those spotter planes are up there giving that boat direction. Then the boat goes in the right direction. Then you got the harpooner on this like 20 some foot platform all the way off the front of the boat
Right.
with this giant harpoon. And like I said earlier, I recently found out that there's like current going through some of these harpoons that helps aid in the
The
capture of
harvest.
that fish.
Yeah.
I
Interesting.
don't know anything about that to speak intelligently, but that's just what I heard from a buddy of mine. But yeah, so and they're harpooning commercially. You know, I'm thinking, we get a recreational permit. You're only allowed during the jumbo time period, and then you've got a. It's not like around here in Virginia where it's the onesie twosies. You'd have to go to like Hatteras, Outer Banks, find the schools,
Hmm.
try to get ahead of whatever direction you think they're heading in, or
Hmm.
if they're like smashing bait and they're white watering bait, then get in and swim towards them that way. But then once you do that, you're going to have to dive down and then close the gap on it because you really have to be within a minimum of 15 to 20 feet.
And they're so fast. I mean,
Oh yeah.
the variables that would have to come together for you or anyone to successfully spearfish a jumbo bluefin tuna would be damn near a miracle, in my opinion. I kind of want to like get National Geographic or somebody to like pick this up, and like I'm picturing this like, the epic journey of spearfishing a bluefin tuna. And I want to see you get like dropped out of a helicopter into a feeding school of bluefin tunas, and then they
That's right.
I don't know, my
You'd be in
imagination's
there.
running
That's right.
wild, but it would be quite the remarkable harvest for sure. And I just appreciate that you're, willing to ask the question. Again, this is a sensitive conversation because obviously they're a highly regarded species. They're very tightly, regulated. And I think Virginia falls into the federal regulations for bluefin tuna, whereas some other states are state level. And again, I'm not an expert on this stuff, but I just in the back of my head, I've got these images of these videos you see of these big boats with all these guys with these giant, cane poles just hoisting
Yeah.
tunas in one after another, and it's like you get this image of them being like so abused on one hand, but again, it's a specific species, the bluefin tuna, that we've got to be a little bit more mindful of. But it does beg the question, like perhaps there could be some future exception for the rare exception to the rule, which would be somebody like yourself that wants to go take on that challenge.
Yeah. And also, you can make it as tight of a regulation as you want as far as we're concerned. Maybe you have to be free dive level certified. You've got to have a safety, vest on, whatever it is, we can work on whatever the tighter regulations, could be.
Hmm.
A special spearfishing permit, which I'd gladly pay for. You know what I
Right.
mean? So,
Right.
make the barrier to entry difficult,
Hmm.
so that just some newbie going out there with a 90 centimeter one band spear gun isn't trying to freaking go drown himself,
Right.
because
Yeah.
it would take probably, I would say, almost like a daisy chain of like 3 and 4 atom floats on 100-foot float line with 500-pound stainless steel cable and a stainless steel slip tip with like a 9 millimeter shaft that's 6 foot long on these massive blue water guns. So the equipment alone is
Yeah. Rare.
not
Like
not everybody's
expensive.
got that equipment, and
Yeah.
it's expensive. And I've got it. I shot my personal best tuna in Costa Rica this past year, which was that 150, 160-pound yellowfin tuna, and I've been after that thing for a long, long time. I've shot other smaller yellowfins in Hawaii. I shot a smaller one in Costa Rica a couple years past, but finally found the jumbos, and that
Yeah.
alone was like a minute 45 active breath hold, and you're at your limit down there and your stomach is contracting like crazy, and you got to get in front of dolphins. So you dive down 45, 50 feet, you wait for all these schooling dolphins to go past,
Yep.
and you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and you start seeing the smaller ones and you're still waiting, and then you start seeing the medium-sized ones and you're still waiting, and all this time think about going for a walk around the block and holding your breath for almost 2 minutes.
Yeah, that's a lot of physical strain just to be waiting and hoping for that right one to come along and then hoping that you make the right shot so that you're not getting dragged to the bottom of the sea.
Yeah, there's so many. It's so easy to miss those things
Yeah,
because, like you said, I mean, they're torpedoes moving through the water. They're at a high rate of speed, and it's very, very difficult to get a good shot on them.
Yep. Man, it's an exciting thing to think about because it really is it's such a special way of going fishing, and it's like almost like as old as time, folks, creating spears out of, whatever, bamboo or certain types of wood, and then, diving in the water and catching their meal that way. If you could paint a picture of like what would the perfect regulations look like? You hinted at a few things, but like if you put on your, regulatory hat and thinking about the sustainability of the fishery and what would be like the ethical right thing to do, high level, what would something like that look like to be able to target a bluefin tuna free diving with a spear gun?
So I've actually been working on a little bit of a proposal to try to maybe get it over to the highly migratory species constituents or whatever. But in regards to sustainability, one per year,
Hmm.
which I think it's that recreationally right now.
Hmm.
If I'm not in the water shooting them, I'm going to be fishing for them anyways.
Right.
So it's not like I'm going to be adding to the loss of a fish because I'd still be out there hook and line fishing for them
Hmm.
since I'm not allowed to spearfish for them. So I'm that same one individual fisherman going after that one allowed fish, whether it's hook and line or it's spearfishing.
Hmm.
So the sustainability part really, I think, is a non-issue at this point. If you're just doing one and you're only allowed it during the jumbo season, and then of course I think specific gear requirements, and then a level of certification requirement, and I think that's your real high level view
Yeah.
because again I don't think we're going to be in the way of anybody. You got to find your own fish. You can't jump in around sport fishers anyways. They've got
Right. Right.
4 to 12 lines out.
Yeah.
You jump in near one of those, and you think about it too, because all those lines that are out, if one tuna hits their line and you're in the vicinity, if that tuna comes your way, you could get into serious trouble. Not even by the hook, but just you got a 200-pound mono line coming across you. It's either going to cut you up or take you wherever it wants to go. And if you can't get to your knife in time, which we like to practice. A lot of
Hmm.
people don't visualize that, don't practice it. I'll sit at home sometimes and I'll practice getting to my knife. I'll practice getting to my belt knife, my leg knife, and a lot of times I'll take my mask and snorkel off underwater and then make my way to the surface. A lot of people don't practice that, which is a
Hmm.
safety thing. I think and that's in any sport. You visualize. I looking at it like this, I would say like going on a I don't know, like a elk hunt or something like that, like in Alaska, where it's
Hmm.
like difficult environment. You're only allowed one. You've got to get a special permit, or it's a lottery drawing, or whatever it is. It's just a significantly more difficult thing to do. So, I think high level, things I covered would be fine as far as trying to get in and shoot one on the Atlantic.
Yeah, making it a possibility. It's the, sort of equivalent to like climbing Mount Everest. Very few are going after trying to do it. And it's one of those things too, I think, where as we see time change with we're seeing cobia regulations, potentially change. We're seeing some potential changes upcoming with striper. You know, it's a moving target line to always adjust and keep up with the current recreational harvest in conjunction with what is appropriate to sustain a species. And so, perhaps 5 years from now, we're having a very different conversation around spearfishing for bluefin tuna on the Atlantic. And I think it always starts with folks like you, just at least asking the question, because there are the committees that vote on these things and that take public opinion. So maybe it's just one of those things where like nobody's ever really asked because again, like you said, how many people are actually wanting to put on a wetsuit in January and jump in the water out past, the tower and try to spearfish a bluefin tuna? Probably not a lot. So
Yeah,
it's been
not
fun
many.
just to at least, entertain the idea and juggle it around a little bit to see like what would it look like if we could do this. But and totally other topics. It is December, and of things that we can spearfish, is there anything that you're targeting right now that is a feasible thing to do this time of year?
Yeah, tog. And
Okay.
there's some big togs. Now, full disclosure, I hate the cold water. So I'd be out there. Latest I think I dove last year was November, and the
Okay.
year before that I dove in December. We went out to the windmills,
Hmm.
and there's some pretty big togs that hang out there in the. I just blew up the windmill spot. I guess if people didn't already go fish there, but there's some big old togs out there because there used to be nothing out there, nothing but sand.
Right. And now we got these big
And
structures.
oh man, there's the big structure. It's loaded with growth all the way down, and it's just a straight pole. So some people don't know that it's just a straight pole that goes all the way down. There's no like wide base that opens up at the bottom. But at the bottom, it's like 73 feet to the bottom. It's granite rocks everywhere. So it's
Ah,
basically the bridge tunnel out there.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought it was a big, large base at the bottom.
Nope. There's a grate. I'll send you a clip, but there's a grate that kind of comes out, stabilizing grate that comes out that's in the middle
Hmm.
at 40 feet. And I want to say it's from 40 to like 45. I want to say it's like maybe 10 to 15 feet long. So it juts out and it goes all the way around the circumference of it. And there's a lot of lines stuck in there because I don't think people know that it's there, and they're
Ah,
probably dropping their jigs down. And a fish will take you into that grate because they're looking for safety. And if you've already got them in the upper water column, they're going to try to take you in there.
interesting. So it's almost like a grate at the bottom that rests on the ocean floor, and then all those granite rocks are put in on top of it to hold it in
No, the
place.
grate doesn't even make it to the ocean floor.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, once you get to the bottom down, there's just a straight pole and granite rocks around it.
Oh, wow. Very interesting. So any sort of base, so to speak, is actually like under the seabed?
Yeah, correct.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. I had no idea. I mean, that whole construction, we could have a whole other podcast on just like how in the world are they building these things. But so tog or something feasible to go after. Obviously,
Yeah,
nobody
black
likes the,
sea bass.
yep, sea bass, and nobody likes the cold. So it's like you're not going to see a whole lot of folks out there spearfishing for them right now, but it is an option.
Yeah, and there's some buoys out there that some of the buoys have a lot of mussels on them,
Hmm.
and those mussels are like the size of the palm of your hand. Yeah, and it's the freshest mussels on planet Earth because you're eating them that day.
Wow.
Yeah, I
Okay.
was at Whole Foods the other day. As a matter of fact, I was in Whole Foods the other day, and I was like, you know what? Let me check to see how these mussels are harvested. And it was like the date on them was like 11/23 or something like that, harvested. And then they was like, I guess they harvest them and then they put them in a
Prime.
indoor or outdoor sort of like saltwater situation until
Mhm.
they're ready to send it to market. Or like I'm transporting them bad boys from the sea to my belly.
That reminds me back in the day, I used to have some neighbors that were divers and they would go out and come back with flounder. I want to make sure I'm not misremembering this. Are there some sort of lobsters out there?
Yeah, there's spiny lobsters out there.
Spiny
A lot
lobsters,
of the
that's right.
wrecks.
Yeah. And then the bags of mussels, like bags of mussels. And I
Yeah,
remember eating some of those. They were so good.
the wrecks are loaded with mussels also, but the problem with the wrecks is, there's always a crazy amount of current.
Hmm.
And the wrecks are, 50, 60, 80 feet.
Yeah.
So trying to one, get up current of the wreck, dive at the right amount of time and pitch black chocolate milk water that we have,
Yeah.
finding the wreck, and then, getting the mussels off of them is really difficult. So on the buoy chains, when you dive down ahead of the buoys, you can drop down to 30 feet and then hang on to the chain. And you're hanging on to the chain, and then you've got your bag for your
Uh-huh.
mussels, and you just grab a few and toss them in there. You can get 6, 8 pounds of mussels, and that's enough for you and the crew because they're just so big.
Yeah. That's awesome.
You got to watch out for the sea urchins though, because there's sea urchins down there, and you get those stuck in your hand. That's
Yeah,
not fun.
I'm sure that doesn't feel very good.
That's not fun, and they hide too. They're you'll get like a big clump of mussels,
Yeah.
and you don't even feel the pinch yet. And then you get up to the you get up to the boat and you got like 15 little black pricks in your fingers. And
Ouch.
that's when the swelling starts.
Yeah, when their little poisons start to get in there. Wrapping up, if folks want to, follow you and your adventures, what's the best place for them to go check out Fishing for Mortgages?
Yeah, I'm just about everywhere. Fishingformortgages.com is my website. You can go there and check me out. Any questions you have, it's free to ask. Just like it's always going to be a no if you don't ask, which is why I'm going to be asking about the bluefin tuna and see if we can't get spearfishing legalized. But also on Instagram at Fishing for Mortgages, and I've started a YouTube channel, but it's not really up and running. I got some shorts on there, and I just recently put a like a 15-minute clip, which got some cool whale footage from Costa Rica.
That's
But that's
awesome.
also Fishing for Mortgages.
Very, very cool, man. And for folks that are like, man, I never really thought about spearfishing, but I might want to start thinking about doing it. What's the first step? What's the first thing that they should do to start getting ready for the 2025 season once these water temperatures warm up a bit?
Absolutely get free dive certified. There's a Virginia Beach Spearfishing Facebook page, and there's several coaches on there that can get you free dive certified. And then get in touch with people who have been doing it for a long time. There's several people on there that have a lot of experience. Go on there, ask some questions, and everybody on there is pretty nice. A lot of the times you feel like you go on the magical interwebs, ask a dumb question, and then you get crucified by
Yeah,
all the fantastic internet trolls. But for the most part, everybody on that page is really, really good, and they'll answer your question and help you out.
very cool. Awesome. Well, thank you for being on the show, man, and asking the question and enjoy just, batting this around and seeing what it would be like. So thanks again for hopping on. And folks, that's going to wrap up a cool segment talking about spearfishing some bluefin tunas. Y'all hang around for a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with you here real shortly. It's time we talked about catching some serious savings. Imagine harnessing the power of the sun to cut your energy bills and having a roof that's built to last. Convert Solar and Roofing specializes in top-notch solar installations and durable roofing solutions that stand up to the toughest elements. Their solar panels are designed to maximize efficiency, and their roofs are built with premium materials to ensure long-lasting protection. Whether you're out on the water or at home, their expert team ensures you're covered. As fellow anglers in the Lower Chesapeake Bay, the team at Convert Solar and Roofing cares about both sustainable living and sustainable fishing. So reel in those savings today and visit www.convert-solar.com or call 757-44-SOLAR. Make your energy and roof as reliable as your favorite fishing lure. Call Convert Solar and Roofing today. Pure Flat slick lures are tried, true, and guide approved. Slick lures catch big speckled trout, redfish, flounder, and more. You can cast them a mile, and they produce a highly erratic bait fish imitation with a twitching retrieve. The tournament-winning slick has helped many anglers set personal best records. Whether you're fishing the OG slick, the smaller profile slick junior, or the versatile little slick, one is sure to find that unforgettable thump we're all after. Visit your local tackle retailer or pureflats.com for your favorite color and rigging combination. Go sling some slicks today. You can't catch them on the sofa. All right, guys. Well, welcome to the final segment of this week's show. We're going to dive into some of the fishing that's been going on inshore, and we're welcoming back to the show Captain Travis Kemp with Foolproof Fishing. Morning, Captain Trav. How you doing?
Morning, Luke. How are you?
I'm good. It's cold, man. It went from raining cats and dogs, and now snapping. We're freezing cold again.
Yep. That's wintertime in this area, man.
A little temperamental. That's Virginia Beach. You wake up, it's wintertime. By lunchtime, it feels like spring, afternoon, summer, and then it's fall again in the afternoon. But how does that affect the trout fishing? What have you guys been seeing and doing lately?
Well, it's been pretty good, to be honest with you. A lot of good deep water fishing.
Okay.
We've caught them up to almost 40 feet deep the last week or two.
Wow. Now, is that primarily over in the Elizabeth River that you're talking about deep water fishing?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That makes sense. 2 days ago, I was driving across the bridge into Chesapeake and looked to my right and to my left, and I probably saw 30 boats right there in that little spat of the river going across the high rise. What's drawing those fish in there?
Honestly, I believe the cold snap makes them go deep, and definitely during the daytime, the fish like to go deep.
Okay. And is that just to try to find warmer water, deeper? Is that what happens in the ecosystem?
I believe that's how it works. And then once it gets so cold, they'll come up on the flats when it's nice and sunny and try to warm up. So it's kind of like they go here to get warm, and then when it finally hits that point, then they'll start to move shallow again to get warm.
Got it.
Kind of weird creatures, man.
Yeah, I mean, they seem to be very, seeker sensitive to the temperature. I've definitely experienced that with speckled trout, where, as those temperatures drop, you have to, really slow things down and be sensitive to that temperature. But, fishing for them in the shallows once it's warmed up versus fishing for them in the deep, how do you change up your tackle to target them? And then, what kind of factors do you pay attention to when it's time to make a move from deep water to shallow water?
Well, personally for me, I'll mark, look on the screen on the side scan if they're there. You fish for the fish you can find.
Mm-hmm.
But I like catching them in shallow water where you don't necessarily see them.
Mm-hmm.
You just have that intuition that they're in a certain area. And you're gonna give it a shot. It's definitely more fun fishing in the shallower water using mirror lures, Paul Browns, even top waters.
Okay.
Versus deep water jigging, which is fun too, but it's a lot harder to feel the bite. You gotta make sure you're tight with your jig head or whatever you're fishing in the deep water, and it's tough for people that aren't quite dialed in on it to be successful at it.
Okay. And, if I were to go out there, on my own, you talked about marking fish. How hard is it to differentiate, a trout on your fish finder from, say, a little bit of bait?
Well, definitely the size of the marks makes a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
In the way they sit together,
Okay.
Trout, when you see a school of trout on the screen, they just have I don't know how to explain it, but it's just a certain way they lay that you can almost always tell a trout versus something else like gar or, mullet or shad or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That makes sense. And then in terms of like presenting that bait down deep, what size jig head are you using, or what type of lure are you using, and how are you paying attention to where your bait is in the water column to make sure that you're getting it down to the same area that the fish are in on your finder?
Well, the last couple of days we've been deep water fishing, they have been bellies in the mud, and you've had to fish it painfully slow.
Okay.
I mean, just creeping it across the bottom, whether you jig it twice and let it sit, or you just super, super slow drag.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is making sure that you feel the bottom.
Okay.
I like to use really, really light line and, like a 3/8 ounce jig head. Some guys will use heavier stuff so they can make sure they're feeling the bottom. But I like to go as light as I can go to feel and still be able to feel the bottom.
Okay. Got it.
But everybody has their personal preference.
Yeah. And I mean, on that note, like, I can definitely feel the bottom when I'm like sea bass fishing, for example, because I've got a nice big weight on there. What type of rod are you using and line, like you said, to be able to feel a jig hit the bottom when you're only using what, like a half ounce or 3/4 ounce? Like what weight jig are you using?
I like to use, like I said, like a 10-pound, an 8-strand braid, either J braid or, they've got the new Berkeley X9. That stuff's pretty good.
Okay.
Power Pro Super Slick. 8-10 pounds, something super light. And then, 3/8 ounce jig head. Some guys will go up to a half or even bigger, but I don't like to go much over a 3/8.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like a, super light rod, medium light. Some guys use lights. I usually use a medium light and, an extra fast. That's kind of the one different thing that I know I do is I'll use an extra fast rod when I'm deep water jigging, because everything is so subtle in the tip of the rod.
Okay. Got it. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely some like high sensory fishing there to be able to pay attention to that light of a jig, actually, connecting with the bottom and then being patient enough to just, give it those little jigs and then wait. How have you been able to, do that and figure that out? I mean, that to me would be a tough thing to commit to, just like letting it sit on the bottom, give it a little jig and wait. How long are you typically doing that before you're getting a bite?
Well, once you find the fish, and you see them, where they're at, you catch a couple. It's just all about finding the cadence that the particular school of fish is trying to trying to feed on, So you just try different things until you find out, what's working the best. Try, jigging it fast, popping it up real high, letting it flutter back down to the bottom. Try reeling it real slow. Figure it out. You got to figure out what they want, and then once you get them dialed in, you can usually do pretty good. And then there's some days you can mark them, and they're stacked like cordwood, and you can't get them to bite nothing. Those are the frustrating days.
You just threw a saying out there that tells me you're from North Carolina without telling me you're from North Carolina. Stacked like cordwood. What does that mean?
No, it's stacking up cords of wood.
Ah, okay, got it.
Gotta have that wood for burning in the wintertime.
Yep,
when it gets temperamental like today.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and got to let it sit out and season and get right so that it'll burn good. And that's interesting. I mean, so when they're stacked up like that and won't eat, I mean, any indication why?
Usually, if you sit on them long enough, you can find out. A lot of times it has to do with tide.
Okay, got it.
And that's one of my problems is I don't like to leave them once I find them and try to figure out what it is that's making them bite or not bite. And most of the time, it's a cycle of the tide. At least in the Elizabeth River for me.
Got it. I mean, that's an interesting thing. Like, I know we've talked to some of these guys about bluefin, and it's like it's frustrating when you're seeing marks and fish just aren't eating. And I guess that sometimes that's just the situation at hand, and you got to just deal with it. In terms of like your
you cobia fish, about fish not eating.
Oh gosh, yes. It'll torture your soul, but it's also the thing that keeps you coming back, because once you do get it figured out and you do get them to eat, it's obviously so rewarding and fun.
That's right.
Lure choice, like do colors matter in the river? Does the size, like difference between a 3, 4, 5 inch, maybe jerk shad or diesel minnow, does it matter much? Color, size, like what are you typically finding is best to start with out there in the river?
My go-to for starting is usually something, either like a 4-inch diesel minnow or paddler, scented paddler. And, when I'm seeing them deep, and then, I'll start with something darker and, switch it up. So they're not biting that. I'll go, white is always something you want to have. If you don't have white when you're trout fishing, you need to go to a tackle store, because you need to have something white, no matter what water you're fishing or what time of year it is.
Right.
White is something that's always something you need to try.
Okay, got it.
But purples, browns, dark greens, stuff like that is usually what I stick to.
Okay. And, working one of those lures, like let's say that we're up in more of like the shallow water, I kind of can, the deep water kind of makes sense. That sounds, I'm not going to say simple, but pretty straightforward, getting it down to the bottom and then just giving it a little pop, waiting, another little pop. But like when you're working it in like a 10 to 12 foot water column or even up in the shallows, like talk me through how you're actually like, working that lure through the water. Like what kind of twitches are you using? What kind of pauses are you, what are the important things to pay attention to with your rod, line, and lure as you're working that lure through the water column?
Well, in my opinion, the most important part is the pause, because 99% of the time a speckled trout's going to hit it on the pause.
On the pause, okay, got it.
Yeah, especially when you're using lures. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious, when you pause it, I remember fishing down in Alabama with some of the guys from the Alabama Saltwater Fishing Report, and they taught me something that I didn't do before, and that is, when I pop my rod tip and pause it, I had a bad habit of letting my line go slack, and I realized I was missing a lot of bites. So what's your kind of recommendation or technique for when you do pause it? How do you pause it, but then still manage to keep some sort of enough tension on your line to where you can still feel a bite?
Yeah. Well, one thing, especially, wintertime trout fishing, is when you're doing a twitch and you go to pause, you're not moving the bait very far. So if you have your rod tip pointed at the bait, when you twitch, you can just lift your rod tip and pull that slack out of your line and just feel it for a second.
Okay.
And then, reel down the slack when you're getting ready to pop again.
Okay. Got it. That makes sense. And then
that's the easiest way.
Got it. And setting the hook. I mean, trout have notoriously soft mouths, and I understand it's easy to potentially like almost rip the bait out of their mouth. Like when it comes to setting the hook, what's your what's your theology around that?
Oh man, it's not fun if you ain't set the hook.
Hook sets are free,
But
right?
no, yeah, that's right. Just you don't have to get crazy with it. Some guys do, but no, just an easy lift hook set. Once you start to feel a little bit of tension, you can lay into them. But you
Okay.
definitely, you're using braid with no stretch most of the time. You don't want to slack line hook set or set like your Bill Dance, because you will pull it right out of their mouth or essentially rip their lips off, as they say.
Right, right. Cross their eyeballs.
Yeah.
Got it. And so that I guess, comes down to both the type of rod that you're using in terms of like whether it's a, medium, fast or whatnot. So what type of rod are you typically using, and then where are you setting your drag at?
Oh man, I've got multiple different kinds of rods for different types of lure. Like I said, deep water jigging, I like a medium light, extra fast, and if I'm fishing a Paul Brown or mirror lure, I like something either moderate or fast. You
Mhm.
don't want it to move too much when you jig it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you do your twitch. The slower the rod is, the less speed the lure is going to have when you twitch it. Now that's getting real deep into it, but
Yeah.
um, but yeah, typically everything I have is a medium light, and I fish silly light drag just to keep myself from pulling the hook out of their mouth when I set the hook.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Well, very cool, man. Well, that gets me, excited because obviously when it gets a little cold outside, if you don't have a curtain on your boat or this side or the other, going out in the bay for tog or going out there chasing bluefin can be really uncomfortable. But if you stay inshore and go in the rivers, you can have a pretty comfortable day and get out of the wind most of the time. So folks that are listening, they're like, man, I got to get out there and try this speckled trout bite. What's the best way for them to get up with you on Foolproof and book a trip?
Well, you can get up with me on Instagram, Facebook, or give me a call any time of the day. 252-435-5967.
Awesome, man. Well, tease us a little bit. What's one of the biggest trout you've seen caught this year so far?
Oh man, a friend of mine sent me a picture yesterday of one that was 30 and a quarter.
Oh my gosh.
But I've seen 33s caught and posted on the Facebook. But personally, the biggest one I've seen was about 29.
Wow. That's
There's some big trout around.
that is definitely some big trout, man. Well, I'm excited to see what happens over the next couple weeks going into the Christmas holiday. Folks, definitely give Captain Travis a call and get out there and get tight on some of those speckled trout. Thanks for joining us this morning and give us a report, Cap.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me, Luke.
Absolutely, anytime. All right, guys, stick around for a quick word from our sponsors. We'll be right back with the What Did You Learn segment. Tired of battling salt corrosion on your boat, trailer, and reels? Meet Salt's Gone, your ultimate solution. This powerful, instantly acting chelating agent tackles salt and brine with ease, featuring corrosion inhibitors to protect against future damage and surfactants for a thorough clean. Salt's Gone is pH neutral, making it safe for all boat materials: metal, glass, paint, vinyl wraps, and more. Highly concentrated, just 1 gallon creates 100 gallons of ready-to-use solution. Apply it with or without running water. It's perfect for any situation. Use code GreatDays10 to save 10% at saltsgone.com. Or if you need faster delivery, use Amazon or your favorite retailer. Sam Rust Seafood, your locally trusted source for premium wholesale seafood. Servicing customers from Hampton Roads down through the Outer Banks, Richmond, and surrounding areas, including Fredericksburg, Charlottesville, and Lynchburg, for over 80 years. Committed to the highest standards in the industry, Sam Rust distributes the best of the ocean directly to your restaurant, hotel, or grocery store on time and at a great price. Visit samrust.com to discover how quality, tradition, and sustainability come together. So don't cuss, call Sam Rust. All right, well, let's talk. What did we learn today? So, going back to Captain Jay Brooks, I definitely took away quite a few things. One, I was profoundly impacted by the rice paper, the green rice paper on the tuna, being laid on the side that is the right side up of the tuna that has not been laying on the ground, and that's the, I guess, more desirable side that isn't bruised or this, that, or the other. I found that incredibly comical because it makes such perfect sense, but I would have never guessed it. So next time you see one of those tunas with that green paper, you'll know exactly why it's there. Secondly, just man, there's so much to know about how to properly care for a bluefin tuna once it is caught, if it is a keeper, legal size keeper fish. Having the appropriate tools on board, a sawzall, ample ice. And just knowing exactly what to do to make sure that fish and the meat especially is cared for properly. It really kind of put the sort of fear of God into me to make sure that I'm not going out there, or we aren't going out there to try to harvest a bluefin tuna and not be ready to appropriately care for it. So definitely a lot of great information gleaned from Captain Jay Brooks. Talking to Mike Hosang about the submission that he's going to make for the ability to, legally spear a bluefin tuna. That was definitely a cool conversation. Again, lots to learn there in terms of like how equipment, etc., that you could even begin to dream of hopping in the water and targeting one of those with a spear gun. But I've learned over the last several months of talking to Michael Hosang that if anyone knows how to do it, he is definitely the one that does. So that was a really cool and educational conversation. And then lastly, talking to Captain Travis, about these trout, just learning to pay attention to those temperatures and thinking about, the time of day and whether it's going to be a deep water or a shallow water thing. And then really, really going light on the braid. That's something I picked up on. I've got a couple of trout rods and I'm realizing that my braid is way too heavy. 20-pound braid is just going to be too much to properly feel those small bites and feel that bottom. So another really cool episode, getting to learn from these local guides who are subject matter experts. So thank you guys for tuning in this week, and look forward to talking to you soon. Tight lines this weekend to you, and stay safe out there. Would your insurance cover an air ambulance in a medical emergency? The fact is, insurance doesn't cover the full cost of medical flights, leaving you and your loved ones at financial risk. But with an Air Medcare network membership, you can focus on recovery, not on finances, should the unexpected happen. They take care of everything, with no costs for flights, only when flown by one of their providers. Membership covers your full household and starts at $99 a year. Visit gdo.deals/airmedcare to enroll. That's going to wrap it up this week. Please subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to podcasts. And remember, to get your free AFTCO Camo Sunglasses Cleaning Cloth, just text the acronym LCBFR to 779-345-2918 to get your promo code and be added to our email list so we can send you the new show each week. You guys keep whacking them and be safe out there.